talking about going over to Santa Cruz and the fact that you would spend an entire summer there. I take it this was after the cabin was built or before the cabin was
Well,
built?
it wasn't always finished.
Okay, well, let's take a step back.
Let's
take a step back. First of all, when was the land purchased about? Do you have any idea when Dakin actually sold?
Yes.
Early 20s. So your father went to Dakin finally and convinced him, because there were two parcels of land, weren't there?
Yeah.
The water rights and
But,
also
well,
where the cabin was.
That was not
That
from
was
Dakin.
later, and that was not Dakin's land. Dad bought that later.
Okay, the first land, which is where the cabin was eventually built,
Right.
was that the first piece of land that was purchased?
Yeah.
And was that the only piece that was purchased at that time?
From Dakin.
Yes, at that time.
What would you say it was? Do you know the actual acreage of the piece of property, the parcel
I'm
of property?
Sure. I think it was about 12 acres.
Yeah, that's what I would have said, about 10 or 12 acres, just right there. Did your father already have an idea what he wanted to do there when he bought the land?
Sure, he wanted to build a cabin, a log
And he
cabin.
carefully looked at the trees to make sure there were enough there to build it.
Okay, so he purchased the land, and this would have been the early 20s. And then how soon after the purchase of the land did he start the building of the cabin?
Right.
Immediately.
Oh, immediately.
Sure.
But he
It took
never
years,
had.
though, you know.
Yeah, that's what I would have assumed.
That's why we had to be there so much, because even when he was commuting, he'd come down there and get in his overalls and go to work the minute he got there.
And
Work
we
the
always
whole
had students
time he
down
was
there working, too.
Okay, so what you're saying is during the summer he had responsibilities on the Stanford campus. The rest of the family would be down in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and then as soon as he finished work at sometime in the afternoon, he'd jump on the train and go down, which was what time?
4. Train was
What time would you have to pick him up down there then?
About 5:30.
And your mother would drive down to the station and pick him up, and he'd get back and put on the overalls and go right to work.
Until it was too dark.
Really?
But you know, it took years and years and years because he knew exactly what kind of a fireplace he wanted.
Beautiful,
Cabin.
beautiful. We have to get some pictures of that.
We have them.
Yeah. One of the things I want to do is I can use the camera to take photographs of anything. I
Okay.
really would. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
Well, I'll dig out some for you.
Yeah. I'd like to do that because then I can splice them in. I can edit them in any place I want.
Marvelous pictures of the cabin.
Yeah.
As George Waters, you know, suddenly, after I went on a Stanford trip with him, and he found out that I was Dad's daughter, when we got back here, all of a sudden he presented me with the negatives of a whole lot of pictures that he had taken of the cabin for Dad. And he was a famous photographer, famous professional photographer. And he took magnificent pictures of the cabin.
Inside and out.
And I had copies made for your mother and for Bill, too.
How long ago is it?
Just a few years.
Well, it was
Because
about-
I don't remember seeing.
about 10
I
years
know
ago.
the old pictures that I've seen of the cabin, but those couldn't have been these because those were years ago.
Well, these were years ago, too.
No, but I
Sitting
mean,
on the hearth
were
with
these the
Dad.
ones? Did your father put these in an album so that?
No.
So you'd never seen these before?
Yes.
Yes, we'd seen
We'd seen
them.
them.
I don't know what happened to them.
Yeah. But these were basically something that was very valuable to you in regards that you didn't have a copy of them.
Absolutely. We didn't have the negatives or anything like that.
Fantastic.
And he gave them all to me. He just died.
No, did he?
Let's talk about the experience of building the cabin itself. What would, if your father was commuting down there, what would be happening during the day?
Well, the students would be working. He would.
Well, we didn't always have students.
Oh, we did most of the
Dad,
time.
oh no, Dad did most of
Oh,
it.
come on, Mitch. When it came to putting the logs up and
Of
the
course
roofs
he
and all that, we
needed
did.
help like that with the great big jobs. But he planned it, he
yes,
fiddled,
yeah.
he did it, and I think he did the fireplace
I know he did.
Unaided.
Except for Bill.
Yeah. Well,
In
we
fact,
all sort
when
of
he was
helped.
doing the fireplace, he wore off all 10 fingertips on the rocks, and he had to work with his bandages on.
You know, the
Rocks.
rocks were quite jagged, and I think there was lime in them
Yeah,
or
there
something.
was.
And he just ate his fingers away.
But it wouldn't stop him.
No, I'm sure
he
it wouldn't.
He just kept going, kept going.
That fireplace was
But
a
you know,
masterpiece.
he was.
Yeah, it was.
He
It was a beautiful fireplace.
He was always there when this was going on all weekend. So he had 2 long working days, and I think some of the other days he was there too. It wasn't that he was at Stanford 5
And he'd take his
days a week.
vacation time, too.
Oh, sure. So he was there as much as he possibly could be. It was just absolutely a cause with him. He adored it.
Yeah.
Well, we all did.
What I don't understand is if the cabin were in the process of being built, where were you living down there when he
In the
was
trees.
basically in the trees?
Well, you know,
Your mother was living out there under the trees?
Well,
I find that hard to
Shelter
believe.
from
She did-
mother.
she didn't like
She
that
didn't.
much.
She didn't go until she could be sheltered.
Running water?
Oh
No.
no, not first. We didn't have electricity.
And no electricity.
Yeah.
But that we got all those.
What about your shopping needs?
Oh, it's
Oh, we
easy
have to
to
go down to SoCal.
Okay, and so you drive down to SoCal, hit Maddox Bakery.
That's right.
Well,
What was there in the way of a grocery store in SoCal at that
there was a
time?
funny little grocery store. There was in the bakery, and the hardware store was the
Of course,
best,
we were not
biggest.
that far from Santa Cruz. We went to Santa Cruz to shop later on.
And we went to Capitola all the time. We used to.
Oh,
We used to walk down to Capitola and go swimming.
You would walk from the
Not from
cabin?
the cabin.
Yes, we did.
Oh,
I just.
come on.
Which I did. I don't know where you were.
I certainly.
Seriously, you walked from the cabin
Absolutely.
to the
Drive
beach?
down.
Do you know how many miles? it
Yes,
is?
it's 8 miles.
Well, I don't remember your walking, and I know
No,
I
and I
never
did. We used to hitchhike down there lots of
Oh,
times.
that's not walking.
Well, we did walk too. And Mother would come and get us after we'd been
That's
swimming.
amazing. That's a long distance.
I know it is.
Huh.
That would
What was the size of Santa Cruz, SoCal, Capitola at this time? Were you talking about just several thousand?
Capitola was a little burg.
Was,
Really
was Santa
a
Cruz
dump.
fairly large? Because it was a resort at this time, basically,
Yes,
wasn't
yeah.
it?
Before Carmel, Santa Cruz was the deluxe resort on the coast.
And of course, it had
the music.
Boardwalk, Boardwalk, and
The
Coconut
boardwalk.
Grove was there. The dance
yeah.
place was there.
It had gotten pretty tawdry by these days, but
Mom, I spent my youth there, and I did not consider it tawdry in those
we did,
days.
But now looking back on it, it surely was.
Well, this is something I can identify with in a different kind of way, because when I was in high school, I used to go down to the cabin, and of course we were in cars that time. We did not thumb our way or walk into town, but we used to go to the boardwalk and the beach. What was the beach with the cement, the concrete chip? Pop.
Oh, don't get him
No.
into this. He won't say a word.
No, give me a break.
No.
I can't remember. Seacliff.
Cliff.
Seacliff, which of course was where Uncle David was living at one point there on the bluff. Would you, besides being at the cabin, go other places in the Santa Cruz Mountains or into SoCal or?
Well,
go
we
to
didn't
SoCal
only
once in a
go to the cabin. Dad was determined that we'd see California, and he
We did.
took us all over California.
And these were basically places, specific places that he wanted you to see.
Certainly.
Yes, but-
Yosemite.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the
Up the
only
Redwood Highway
Mhm.
down to Los Angeles.
the only time I've ever been to Sequoia National Park was when we were
Oh,
kids.
really?
And that was just, when it was completely new as a national park. It's the only time I've
It
ever
was
been.
great.
We keep talking about, gee, we ought to do this. But we
I'll go with you.
never-
I've been there quite a few times though since then. But we used to take people who come from the east, who want to see California there, and I'd take them there among other places.
So your father had a great interest in you seeing California.
Oh, absolutely.
As you were growing up.
And all the beauty of California. Was that was
We
the
didn't
main.
get into the Trinity Alps, and we didn't get into the San Diego area.
True.
But those are the only two parts of the state, I think, where we really didn't go.
Mhm. Oh,
You remember the time we got the ticket up near Petaluma?
The ticket?
The speeding ticket? It was when we had the Cadillac
Touring car.
touring car, convertible touring car.
Well,
Oh, whose car was
It
this?
was Dad's.
Well, this was in the 20s, Jim.
Still, it's a Cadillac convertible.
Well, it's
Well,
not.
it was a
Tim, these
it was
things were huge cars, but you could put the top
Put the
down,
top down.
all the
It was
way
convertible.
down. You remember how cars like that.
A Cadillac was a luxury car at that time,
I'm
wasn't
sure
it?
it was a second-hand car.
But our dad loved good cars.
Yes, he always had good cars.
And he thought that if you turned them in every year, that was an economical way to.
Yeah, right. I thought it was
See?
when I was growing up. It was every 2 years, and it was with him. It was always it Buicks?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I think it was
Yeah.
always Buicks until he finally got that dog
Awful.
Rambler.
Rambler thing.
God, that was a terrible car. I don't know.
Anyway, we got stopped for speeding up there. And Dad was a fast driver. We were always.
Yes, I know that.
And the cop that stopped him was going to haul him right into the judge right then and there and let him throw the book at him. And he, I guess he did. Yes, he did take him to the judge. And then Dad had to give his address and everything. And the judge looked at him and said, Oh, you're a poor college professor. Case dismissed.
Dad must have been looking very
I love
poor.
that. He used to joke about that.
Well, I think.
I remember being terrified when the cop came. Stop.
Oh, I don't think. The funny thing about your father is I don't think he was stopped that often, was he?
No.
Well, he was.
He was a fast driver who was relatively safe and careful in terms of.
And he was very alert.
He was a very good driver until he got so he didn't want to drive anymore. He didn't like driving when he was older.
Yeah, I can remember that as well. The cabin itself, let's finish that aspect of it. It was started in the mid-20s or early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
What would you think? And then how long do you think it was before it was, you moved into it, you were actually living
Well,
in it?
we were
all the
in it
time.
all the time. All the time it was being built.
So
It's like
the
our
first
house.
summer, was it built enough so that there was a foundation and you could actually...
Well, one
we
year
just
it was like
stayed
our
there.
house up at Echo. 1 year there's a foundation. The next year maybe there's a framework. The next
then,
year after that there
you
were
know,
walls.
just-
The next year after that
it
there
was
be a roof.
fantastic when we got the roof.
Oh,
Remember
that
when
was
we got
terribly
the roof?
exciting.
And so getting the roof took you a number of years, is what you're saying.
Sure. This was a long project.
What are you talking about? 8 years?
Oh,
10
Oh,
years?
10 or 12.
10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And so by the mid-30s, for example, it was
Yes.
it was very livable
It
by
was
the
deluxe
mid-30s.
compared
Yes, it
to
was.
how it had been before.
Now, what about the surrounding area? He landscaped that area to some
No, he
degree,
didn't.
didn't he?
Well, he
Well,
put in a
stream.
Yeah.
He put in
there was a
sprinklers.
natural stream. He just improved on it.
Okay.
But
The
he
pool.
He built the ponds there.
He
the
put
pools.
pools and he planted the ferns where he wanted
Yes.
them,
And he
yes,
lit up the
did.
place, and he put
landscaped
sprinklers
it, but it
around.
was-
Yeah, but he didn't really landscape it in the sense that you think of landscaping. He just
He did, but
he
his
planted
idea of
just-
landscaping is you wouldn't notice it was landscape. That's what I always thought of him.
Yeah.
He just sort of
Brought the natural
glorified
plants.
the na-
Yeah.
nature
That's
a
right.
little bit.
And that's all he ever wanted to do.
But in a more or less orderly, organized way, so that there were things that you could see from certain parts.
He kept getting new ideas. It always was a new idea. And then when he built that little house for Mother up at the top of the hill,
The chaperone's cabin.
Yeah.
cabin and all of the sleeping places were the kids, because we all had friends. We were down there all the
Now,
time.
were those sleeping areas male and female in
Definitely.
nature?
There was the crow's nest and the bullpen.
And the bullpen was for women?
No,
Oh, Jim, the crow's nest was for
Please.
women.
Which was the
bullpen
one? Which
for
was the
men.
one down below?
there wasn't.
Wasn't there
one
one right behind the cabin, and there was another one way up on the side of the hill?
Well,
No,
they
there was
were
one
both sort of behind
Directly behind the cabin, the one that was the closest behind the kitchen was the crow's nest.
nest. That
See,
was
okay,
where-
I'm having some difficulty here because my memory is that if you went back behind the cabin, within 10 yards, there was one back
farther
there.
than that.
Was it really?
Oh yeah, it was up the hill a little.
Well,
Because they were both built where there were groups of trees.
okay, but one was by the outside barbecue pit.
Well, that was
No,
it
it
was
was beyond.
across beyond.
Okay.
It wasn't right on top.
The
of it.
barbecue
No.
was between the two.
Okay, and then there was a very small one that I thought that only had a double bed
Oh,
there.
Oh no.
No.
The bullpen was big.
No, I'm saying I think there were 4 places that I remember
no.
outside.
Oh well, there was the little house.
The little house up on top.
That's a chaperone's
Then there was
cabin.
another one that was, if you got to the back of it, was way up on the side of the hill.
Well,
That wasn't ours.
that was the bullpen.
No, the bullpen was to the left of the cabin as you looked
As
up.
you looked.
Yeah, up to the left of the
Sure, that
cabin.
And it
the
was
bullpen.
big.
It was big.
But then, just beyond the stream, where it kind of cut off and a trail went up, going up to the house,
Oh,
and the other
I see
trail
what
went
you
off,
mean.
going
I know
up there.
what you mean.
There was another place
You're
right
You're
there.
absolutely right. He leveled off a place there, and when he had other guests that weren't sleeping with the boys and the girls, before he had other room, there was a sleeping area down there. You're
Yeah.
absolutely
But
right.
it wasn't anything fancy.
No, it was not. It was a cleared off area
there
that
was
had
a
one
double-
place for a
double
double
bed.
bed.
You're right.
Like that's what was there. But I remember it. I mean, these are memories that I have. I take it from the time you moved in until for all the rest of the time there were
Let's talk about a time we moved.
Okay,
No, we
okay.
just were there.
The time that the cabin was being used, there were people coming down all the time that were not members of the family,
Oh
friends,
yeah, and even when we weren't there, it became a very popular honeymoon spot. All the Stanford students that had been hauled down there went there for their honeymoon,
including you.
including us, including Ep and Jack, and all kinds of people.
Um,
You know something? Mother used to use it as a testing ground. You know, as I look back on it, if there would be a young man who was becoming attentive to me, you would invite him to come down to the cabin. Nothing was ever said. I can distinctly remember it would only take me half a day to discover that he was not the kind of a guy I liked at all. It depended entirely on how he reacted to the cabin.
When did you take Maren down there?
Well,
After
that
we were
was,
married.
yes.
Okay, explain that to me. I'm having some difficulty with this. You didn't want that kind of a test?
We didn't have
Well,
time.
there was.
Did Maren like the cabin?
Oh, he loved it.
I don't remember
Don't
him
you
being.
know
I don't
that
remember
Benny
him
and
being there.
Maren became engaged in what month?
In December.
And were married in February.
Oh, so it was very short.
Oh, there was no time to be fooling around down at the cabin in the middle of the winter.
How often did you go down after you were married?
Well, of course, we
Well,
were
they
living
were-
in the East
they
for
were
a while.
gone.
Yeah, so you couldn't
So
at that time.
yeah,
But
yeah.
when you came
We came
back
back, we went down
and took the kids.
and took the kids. We also chaperoned for Bill and Di before they were married. We used to go down and chaperone. They loved having us as chaperones. They said we were also the best chaperones they have ever had because they never knew when we were going to appear. There were a couple of times when we went to parties before we went down, we wouldn't get there until 2 in the morning, and they were terribly nervous about what time we'd be coming in.
So you'd be driving down to the Santa Cruz Mountains after midnight?
Oh, sure, lots of times from the time we were young.
That's amazing.
But you know,
I
it's a
drove
very
everywhere.
different situation, Jim, with your father and me.
In what regard?
Well, he was at the cabin from the
Lots of
time,
time he was-
the beginning. I mean, from the time he came to this country.
I never thought about that, but I guess the Mackenzie
Oh, sure,
boys
we
were
were
all
all there.
all
They
down
were
there,
all
weren't
there,
they?
and
and
Of course,
Elspeth
your
as well.
grandmother and grandfather used to come down too.
Yeah, that's another thing. I can't imagine them being there. They
Well, I don't remember they ever
Well,
stayed. They came,
came.
but they never stayed.
really. So my grandparents knew that cabin. My Mackenzie grandparents
Oh,
knew
yes.
that cabin.
But not, you know, they didn't come and stay.
Was on the
So
way to
their
on the way to
children
Carmel or
were-
what?
Their children
Well,
were
yes,
there
they
the
might have
whole
been on their way to
time.
Carmel or
Yeah,
someplace
something
else.
like that. Sure,
Yeah.
and their kids were probably all there.
So Elspeth would come down with you possibly.
Oh, sure, definitely. And Dave and Ian would come with Bill.
Who would Pop come with?
Nobody.
Yes.
Nobody. Yeah.
But when after his mother went back with his father, you know, we spent lots of time down there when we were older.
Okay, let's talk for a second about your favorite places. My assumption is Edenvale was one, Sanford House was another, and the cabin was a third.
Of course, for our-
Anything on that echelon besides those three?
No, not with
Not for
Dad.
you either. That was it. Those were the best places to be.
Best.
But they were all very different.
Oh, sure.
All
that's
three of
one
them
of
were
the
so
good
exciting.
things about it.
We
Yeah.
had such variety.
Yeah. From the standpoint of growing up when you were young, where was your favorite place? Was it getting away to
I
the
don't
cabin?
think you did have a favorite place.
They're all just so different. It was just that
My favorite place was 462 Santa Teresa.
it was.
Well, I adored Edenvale, and I spent so much time there too, from the time I was, before we moved to Stanford.
So that was really a special place for
It was
you.
very special with me, because I spent a lot of time with my grandmother there.
And she was the oldest grandchild, and she was there more than any of us.
When you say you spent time with your grandmother there, where were you? Actually, what part of the house? What kinds of things would you be doing?
Uncle Dick's room or Uncle Orlo's room, which was, Uncle Orlo's room was across the hall from Grandpa's and Grandma's, and Uncle Dick's was just down the hall a little bit. And,
Well, we used to go.
or at Leanna's room when she was there,
Oh,
she'd share
that
out with me.
was-
That was heaven.
Real treat. It smelled so
It
good.
smelled
She had such
heavenly. It was so
beautiful,
beautiful.
things. That was the treat of all time. I can remember
Even
once
when
we
you weren't-
both stayed there when she wasn't
Yeah.
there.
But even if you weren't staying in there,
Oh,
if
it
you
was
were in
such a
another room,
treat.
we would sneak in there and just
And
go
just
around
look
and
at
admire
her
it.
closets with all her beautiful clothes.
And when she would come back from Paris, which she did at least once every 2 years, with a trunk full of things that she had brought, I can remember helping her unpack and
And
swooning over everything that came
the
out.
Hayes girls loved clothes.
Yes, they
and
did.
my gosh, they spent more time over their wardrobes and
This all three of them? And does it
Yeah,
include your
A
mother?
little more than mother, I think.
yes, but mother would get right into it with them.
Oh, yeah,
she
she would.
loved seeing all these things.
Now, I already said I think your mother had a special relationship with Orlo. I think she also did with Miriam.
Oh,
There's a
oh,
real
very close.
closeness
Also
there.
with
Very
Vienna,
close.
also
They were
with
all
Des.
very close.
She absolutely adored Uncle Bill.
Yes, she did.
He had a very special place in her life.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say that about every one of her siblings then,
It's
couldn't you?
absolutely true. Absolutely.
Was Miriam at this time was younger, of course, than your mother was. What was she doing? I heard Orlo, I heard Did, I heard a little bit about Leetta.
Well,
What about
she was
Miriam?
married when
Very young.
Uncle Ed came back from the war.
So she hold it. She never attended college
No,
then.
she was not well when she was young, and they didn't think she was well enough to go. She stayed home and had a beautiful singing voice and learned to play the piano
And painted.
and paint.
Okay, so you're saying, if I understand this correctly, that she got married just about when you were moving to Stanford.
Yeah,
Yeah, she did.
she did.
So this would have
I
been,
remember the wedding.
and this was. Would you say you were already at Stanford by this time? Do you remember where they were married?
Oh, yes.
Edenvale, yes.
Yes.
They were married at in
Oh,
Edenvale or
Right
at
at the Center
Edenvale.
House in Edenvale.
Yeah.
And I got behind the curtain and cried because Uncle Ed was taking away my favorite aunt.
It didn't stop it though, did it?
No.
No, it didn't work. Then they got. My understanding is he was becoming a lawyer in San Francisco.
Well,
is this
not
right?
then. He was
Not
working. He
until
was
later.
Robert Dollar of Dollar Steamship's private secretary.
Okay, so he had already graduated from college before he went into the military.
I guess he did.
Where did he go to school?
Stanford.
Okay, another Stanford
He
graduate.
was a Fidel.
Another Phi Delta.
Jim, I made a list one time. I guess it was before Greg applied to Stanford. I have 47 relatives who went to Stanford.
Rather
Counting both sides of
incestuous
the family.
situation, actually, isn't it? And so, well, fewer of my generation. I think it's tailing off. So you still have a couple in the next generation possibilities, but you know,
Well, we got one.
yeah, one. Well, so okay, you got one so far, but who knows? You've got a lot of younger kids still. I mean, she's got grandchildren that are just born this year. You know,
Not born
Well,
yet.
It's not quite two.
not born yet. Exactly. I mean, who can tell? That's tremendous. What a range in the next generation
great.
in terms of age.
Oh,
Whole
it's
generation.
wonderful.
You cover a whole generation with that.
I know,
group.
and I realized the other day I could be a great grandmother before my youngest granddaughter was in school.
Yeah.
True.
Amazing. That's really amazing. Anyway,
Well, I could probably theoretically be one before I have one.
Before you had what?
One of my grandchildren. I mean, if Alec, who could theoretically, I mean, he's not going to. Alec or Kenneth could father a child,
more likely Kenneth, I'd say.
Yeah, Elvis.
and Donald hasn't even had any yet. You know, I could still.
It's true. Aunt Miriam then, after she got married, went where? Where did?
Burlingame.
Burlingame.
Oh, so she was
Well,
living
they
in.
lived in San Francisco for a while,
But-
an apartment.
Very briefly, and then they bought the house on Walnut Avenue.
How much did you see of them?
Well, I used to go see
Oh,
her quite a lot.
constantly.
Well, they lived in San Francisco quite a while because their
But
first
we
Joe
saw
was
them
born
so.
when they were up there, and then the next little boy, the one that died, was born when they
We
were
saw them so often because everybody went to Edenville so much.
Mhm.
And because every time they went down there, they came by us.
Mm-hmm. I was always fearful of Uncle Edgar. I
not
had
the
this.
only one.
I had a real thing about him. I don't know what it was. Just being a little kid, very threatening figure to
He
me.
was.
For
I
some
felt that way,
reason,
too.
you felt the same way.
Oh, most people did, and I'm such a peculiar personality that I always felt sorry for him because I thought people felt that way about him, and so I always tried to be nice to him.
But it wasn't an accurate perception
Oh,
that
yes.
he did come across that
Oh,
way
yes.
to people.
Growl.
I don't understand that relationship. I never did. I mean, what did she
I
find?
used to resent it.
What?
I used to resent that. I used to think it was just terrible that she was married.
Why
to
was
him.
she attracted to him?
It's hard to know. There was
She adored him.
I know. I believe that. Although she would have adored anyone.
Yes, true.
No, no.
She-
She had her dislikes too, very definitely.
You know, I never picked that up. If that's the case, and I'm sure you were more perceptive in that regard than I was, I never felt that. I thought she was so incredibly accepting of
Well, she and
things.
Grandma Kester did not always get along like peaches
Well,
and cream by any means.
Okay.
But Aunt Miriam, instead of really doing what most people would do, who had that kind of a mother-in-law who lived with them from the time they were married, she moved in, and Uncle Ed was her only dear boy.
And that's what she called him all the time.
And took over the house. Aunt Miriam, of course, really didn't know how to cook, but Aunt Leah
It
and
didn't
Aunt
bother
Miriam.
Aunt Miriam as much as it would some people.
No, I mean, she put up with patience with things that most people would have just.
I think she was probably glad to get out from under some of the chores, too.
What happened? Well, sure she was, because
Mhm.
Mrs. Kester did a lot of that. She did a lot of care of the kids, but it was very difficult to raise her children because Mrs. Kester was very firm in what she thought, and a very staunch Christian Zionist. And this was hard.
No, it was hard.
And so what happens? Aunt Miriam finally ends up with an ulcer, and no wonder.
She had cancer.
Sure, but she had an ulcer for years before she died of cancer.
It's, as far as that relationship was concerned, the relationship that Aunt Miriam had with her mother-in-law, how long did her mother-in-law live with her? Did you
For 20
Until
years.
Claire
20
was
20
until
years?
Claire was a sophomore in college.
Really?
Yes.
So this was a real intrusion into her life.
Oh, it was a way of life, and she still treated her dear Sonny boy as she always had. It must have been very hard.
Yeah, I would
Aunt
imagine.
Miriam was a saint.
She was.
Yeah.
Everybody knew
So
that.
that's a fairly accurate description. Yes, I'd say that's
She
true.
was. She just had a very sweet disposition. She always saw the best in everybody.
Well,
Yeah.
she got that from her father.
Yes, but she,
A certain naivete,
yes,
Yes. Uh-huh.
sheltered, would you say?
yes.
She had been decidedly.
Yeah. How much did you see of her at Stanford? I mean, she came by, you said, when she was going by Edenville. Did she
Yeah.
ever come with the kids and stay, or?
No,
No.
but she had us stay with her. When Uncle Ed went back to law school, they moved to the city.
When Uncle Ed went back to law school?
Yes, he went back
because
to law school after
he
he
worked
moved
for
on.
Dollar, you see.
In what capacity? Secretary?
Secretary, and then he got a job with someplace up the way, but then he decided he wanted to go to law school. And all this time, he's still working for Dollar, but he's going to Hastings Law School at night. He's got 3 little kids, and commuting just wasn't in it. So they moved to a big old brown shingle in the city, and I
That's
can
an
remember
I still go by it.
exactly how that house looked.
It wasn't a
And-
house, Mitch. It was an apartment.
Well, they were on 2 stories, Betty. 'Cause
yeah, I know, but it was still an
well,
apartment.
whatever it was, she didn't have enough to do. She asked us to come up and stay with her.
We used to stay with her a lot.
Took
Really?
us all over the city. You remember when that motorcycle
Oh, I'll
accident
never forget. I
happened
still
right in
go
front of
back
us?
every time a motorcycle gets in front of me.
Why, what happened?
Well, this guy lost his balance and went off the motorcycle
And
right in front
landed
of us
on
and
his
landed on
head.
his head. And Aunt Miriam stopped the car and went out to help him and
To
left us in
give
the
him
car
help,
scared
but you know, and Miriam, oh, this man, he's hurt, and we left, leaving all
We
these
were out,
kids in the
out
car.
at Ocean Beach.
Yes.
It's a
And this
very,
is the reason none of your kids ever rode a motorcycle, right?
that's one reason why,
Well,
yes.
my husband had something to do with it.
Maybe a little bit.
But really, I'm a basket case every time I see a motorcycle on the freeway to this
That
day.
scared me stupid.
It does me too.
How seriously injured was this guy?
Well, we never did know.
Yeah.
But did he get up and walk away?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
This was a
okay.
serious
Oh,
injury.
yes.
Well, he could have been killed,
I
maybe.
mean, he was right there, all bloody, right in front of us, so that Miriam...
And Aunt Miriam had no problem just going out there and helping out,
No, this
right?
man needs help.
Boom, I'm out the car, I'm
You're
going to help
right.
out.
That was Aunt Miriam.
I
Amazing.
didn't know you felt as strongly as I did
It
to this
was one
day
of
about
my
it.
horrors of
It
my
was me too.
childhood.
Interesting. That's one of those things that was really ingrained in your memory, isn't it?
So it was.
She did not come down very often to be with you at Stanford with her kids.
Oh,
How
she
close?
didn't
Yes.
stay.
No,
Okay.
she didn't
How
stay.
close were you to the cousins?
Very
Very.
close.
They were
Extremely close.
just like four sisters.
Really?
Still are.
Yeah.
What's the age differential here?
Well, Joan is a year younger than
Then
Bill.
Okay.
And then
And
Bob
then
was
Bob was a year younger
younger
than...
than that. Oh, there was Jimmy
No,
in
there,
between.
he 2 years younger
Yeah,
than Joe.
because Jimmy was born in between.
And then
I don't
Claire-
know Jimmy.
Well,
Well,
he
he
died.
died.
in Memphis.
I know. I
He
did.
was born on April 8th.
I never heard this before. Really? How long did he live?
Oh, he's in his...
Well, he was a few months old.
Yeah.
A very sickly child, I take it.
Well, I
No,
think
that
it
was
was...
a
I
kid. He
think
had
it,
something
I
wrong.
think Aunt Miriam was RH negative. Claire was. And they
Yes.
didn't know
I
anything.
never heard this
Yeah.
before either.
Oh, yes.
In other words, you think this was RH negative factor was what?
Well, see,
I don't know that it was, but I...
We were too young to remember all the
But
fine
nobody
medical
ever,
points.
not only that, nobody
knew.
ever heard of RH factor in those days. When Claire found out she was. This was very new in that type of thing.
But you were very close to all of them, all of the
absolutely.
Kester cousins.
Oh, terribly.
And so you spent a lot of time with them at Edenvale
Oh,
or
sure.
San Francisco
At the
and
cabin.
cabin.
Yeah.
They all came to the cabin.
Okay.
And then they got a cabin of their own down there.
Yeah, they loved it so, and Aunt Miriam adored the ocean.
Did she
Swam.
really?
Oh,
Yes.
she loved it.
Not-
Because Nani would never go in the water.
Never.
She never
Oh,
learned how to
no.
swim.
I've
did
got
she?
some pictures of Melanie in the Russian River.
Yeah, but
Well, with
she
a
liked that.
life belt on or a rope or what?
Oh, the
Sort of
water
walking
was-
around.
Yeah, because she did not like the water.
No, she hated it.
hated it.
But Aunt
But-
Miriam loved it, huh?
Oh, yeah,
Loved
she
it.
did.
And you see, the difference between Mother and her sisters is that they learned to do all the things she didn't. She never did anything physical.
Mm-hmm.
And they did.
Whereas they did. They rode
What?
horseback and they swam.
Swam and you know, everything. It was the difference between this
Thank
Victorian lady and the 20th century.
Okay, let's go through, since I just started this and it makes sense now, let's go through the rest of the cousins. You were close to the Kester cousins.
Extreme.
very.
What about the rest of your cousins?
You see,
Because
they
there were
were
sets on
much-
both
they were-
The
sides.
Roth kids, we were very close
Yes.
to.
I've never heard this. Which, you mean, you're talking
Fritz.
now about Fritz?
Uncle Fritz's kids.
Okay, now they were living in Palo Alto.
That's right.
What are the age differentials here? What are we talking about?
Fritz is
was
younger
than Bill.
Okay, so
they're
all of
younger.
your cousins
Yeah.
are younger than the two of
Oh,
you.
sure. We're the two oldest.
Okay, you're the two oldest.
Junior.
And what's the one that's closest to your age?
Joe Kester.
Joan.
Joan is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you see, Uncle Dick didn't marry until he was, well, he married after Uncle Orlo did, so his children were even younger than Uncle Orlo.
Right.
So they were a great deal younger than me.
Okay, so you were close to the Roth kids in Palo Alto. Do you see a lot of them?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yes.
Was Uncle Fritz over to the Palo, or are you over at his house? What
Oh,
was,
all the
sure,
time.
constantly.
how
And
did this
Uncle
work
Fritz,
out?
when he was on calls, would come in and just walk in and our ice box anytime, and he always loved it.
He
Every
and Mother
time he
loved
walked
each
in.
other. They got
Oh,
along just beautifully.
There was another good relationship
Oh,
there.
wonderful.
Really a great relationship there.
And of course, he lived
He
with them, too.
could he kid her? Could
Oh,
he get her to laugh?
yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Gosh, yes.
She was not the easiest person to get to laugh.
Well, when she started to laugh, you couldn't
You couldn't-
stop
That's
her.
right. That's exactly right.
But he lived with him when he was in medical school
In
when
the
I was a
city.
baby.
When
in
they
the
lived
city.
in the city.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And-
Because they helped him through medical school.
Uh-huh.
Of course, they helped Aunt Alice through Stanford.
Right. So you saw a lot of him. He was in and out.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. He used to come by.
Oh, they, of
sometimes-
course, they came to the cabin, too, and then
Yeah,
he
and then they
bought
eventually got
The
thing
property
up
next
front.
to it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but Uncle Fritz used to drop in at odd times, maybe lunchtime or in the late afternoon, and sit out on the front steps of the house at Stanford and tell Dad all about his problems and various
They were
cases that worried the life out
close
of him.
brothers.
That's how I heard
They-
about Marilyn's near death.
Oh, for goodness.
Well, just give me what happened there.
Well, when he was at Stanford, he had pneumonia, and Dr. Lee gave him a prescription. He walked through the hospital, and Marilyn was out in the hall waiting to get into a room. He said, "What's the matter with this kid?" And somebody said, "Well, nobody knows." No, that was later. He did have pneumonia, and they gave him a prescription, which was filled wrong by the pharmacist. And fortunately, one of the boys at the sick new house decided that he was looking a little strange, acting a little weird, and took him down to the hospital. That's when Dr. Lee went down the hall and saw him and said, "What's the matter with this kid?" And he said, "Nobody knows." So he began to snoop around, and he discovered this, and there was an antidote to the drug that he had been given. And he gave it to him. It was the only way he saved his life.
You mean that if it had gone a little bit longer, he would have
He would
died?
have died. And Marilyn's family never knew about that until after we were married. There was a doctor in Palo Alto who was taking care of him, and none of the other doctors had any respect for him at all. Stand this
I'm
guy.
sure I know who it
Yes,
was.
I'm sure you do too.
And you're not going to mention the name of this guy? You don't want to
No,
slander him, do
absolutely
you?
not.
He's been dead for years, though, hasn't he?
But Marilyn's family always thought that doctor had saved his life. And one time when I was up there after we were married, I heard that and I couldn't believe it because I remember Uncle Fritz coming by and sitting out on the porch and telling Dad, "Al, the damnedest thing happened." And then he proceeded to tell him about what happened. He didn't know I knew Marilyn. I was going out with him at that time when I
Right.
was in high school.
You know, that's a very interesting thing because what you're basically saying is that pharmacists made a grievous error here. Would a pharmacist under those circumstances ever be brought to task for something
He
like
should have
that?
been.
I wonder if that ever happened.
No, he wasn't.
Probably wasn't.
I'll bet he probably was not.
I know it was scopolamine instead of atropine or the other way around. I don't remember which it was.
Yeah. Okay, so you had. Did you spend time at the Roth house?
Oh yeah.
Uncle
Yeah,
Fritz's
sure.
house?
Oh, yes. I
Well,
spent the
lots of
whole summer
times-
there taking care of the kids.
And you were more or less playing nanny or babysitter or.
Well, we had a lot to do with those kids when they were little.
Yeah, we really did.
An awful lot.
But a bond, a closeness was created
Very.
there also.
Very.
Yeah. I take it Uncle Bill would have been the same age as some of those kids.
Well, he's
Just a little
not
older.
A little
much
older.
older than Fritz.
But enough so that they could do things
Oh, yeah.
socially
They were
Oh,
great
together all
friends.
the time.
Oh, sure.
So he was with the Mackenzies and the Roth
Oh, yeah.
boys a
And
lot.
the Roths and the
And-
Mackenzies lived very close together.
Now we're talking about
Uncle
Fritz's
Fritz.
Fritz's
Yeah,
house
just
and
down-
the
yeah,
Mackenzie
just
house.
down the block.
Were they friends?
Not
Not parents.
particularly.
Parents
Of course, they
particularly.
knew each other. But the thing is now, for instance, when Mother and Dad went away and when he was doing the Rotary stuff, they went a lot. Betty and I went to Edenvale. Bill went to the Mackenzies. And that is when he was, when he fell out of the tree.
Right.
He was staying with the Mackenzies, but he'd just gone down the block to his uncle's house and climbed the tree in his uncle's backyard.
He told me the other day that he really did not have any vivid memories of anything that happened before he fell out of that tree.
You mean left? You mean they're just completely wiped out?
Well, I know
Yeah.
for months afterwards, he remembered nothing about the accident, nothing about what happened.
Well, that was another
Yeah, but this he told me just a few days ago.
death-defying experience. I mean, he certainly could have been killed.
Oh, and
Oh, he nearly
we
was.
just-
Yeah. Okay, what about the rest of your cousins? Because I hear less about your other cousins.
Well, there was a age difference, Jim.
Right.
And not only that, they didn't live close to us. You see, Uncle Orlo lived in Stockton, and we'd see his little kids. We were in a
Margaret
totally
was the
different
flower girl at my
generation.
wedding.
Right.
They were much younger than
So you just saw them socially occasionally,
At
and that was
Edenvale.
pretty much
At
at
family
Edenvale.
event.
That's about the only thing, unless there was a wedding or something.
Right. But not the close bond that you had
Oh,
with the
no.
Palo Alto
No,
connections
no.
you had there. Then what other cousins did you have
The
on the other
Groots.
side? The Groot cousins,
Oh, well, we
right?
saw an awful lot of the Groots.
Okay, there again, there would have been an
they're-
age differential of a
decidedly.
considerable
See,
amount,
Nancy's
right?
7 years younger than I am, and she's the oldest of the four, so they were just little cousins.
Right. Now, where were they living at the time?
Oh,
They lived in all kinds of
over.
places.
Yeah, but I mean, relatively
They
close
lived
to where
in
you
Palo
were.
Alto when
San Jose.
Nancy was born. And then they lived in Menlo. And then they moved to San Jose. And then they moved
back to New
to
York.
Rochester.
Okay,
And
now
then
when they were
moved to New Mexico.
still living in the Palo Alto area, close enough to you, did you see a lot of the family?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
In what context? Was it because they were coming to visit the parents primarily?
Well, no.
No, no,
They
they
was
were-
just,
they were there.
always around.
It was open house at the Roths,
Of
right?
course.
That's it.
Didn't you
Drop
know?
in anytime you
Of
want.
course. The
Here
doors
we
were
are.
open.
The door is open.
And Uncle Dud and Aunt Alice always used to come after Mother and Dad and going to bed
Yes.
at night.
What?
I always
Oh, they
remember
did.
this. They would go off someplace and they never could pass by without coming, and the doors weren't even locked at night, so they'd come in and go, Yoo-hoo!
So what would happen? Would your mother and father get
Sit
up?
on the bed.
No, they'd sit on the
Sit on
bed
the
and
bed and
yak
visit.
for an hour.
Really?
Oh, sure.
No big deal.
No.
Okay.
Things were easy.
That's pretty open. Pretty open. In terms of the times that you remember as being the sweetest for you as you were growing up, what ages are we talking about? When was the time that you were the happiest? Do you remember?
Oh, heavens, how can you ask
Oh,
me?
Jim,
Expect
there
us to
were
say that.
the years were all so happy. I don't think anybody ever had a happier childhood than I did. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
The only bottom line was when I was sick.
Which was a
Which was
thrill.
what period of time was that for you?
I was 15 when it first hit.
Okay, until you were 15, you were very healthy and well.
No,
I
she
never
was
was very
never
well.
healthy.
This is a lifelong
Yes.
albatross that you have carried, right?
There isn't any doubt about that. She
No,
was
I got-
always sick.
I always got everything that came along. Chickenpox, measles, scarlet fever, the works right down the line.
And she-
And the gamut.
And she
And I
never
get
had any
bad cases of
appetite, and Mother spent all her time trying to feed her.
Fattened me out.
Oh, gosh.
But you still would say that despite all of those problems, it was a great childhood.
Yes.
You know, you
And
can
for
put
me,
your life into
there was
perspective and say that was
nothing.
really
There
good.
was a blot on it that I can even think of.
But at 15, you were bedridden,
Yes.
right? For what length of time?
6 months that time.
6 months that time. What did you do about school? What were you doing?
I worked at home.
So you had stuff from Castellet was sent to you at
Yeah,
that
no,
time?
I used to bring it home to her.
Okay, so you had a conduit. She was bringing the stuff home.
I kept everything
What about
back.
examinations and things like
Oh, I
that?
took them.
She took them.
They'd send them to me at home, and I'd take them.
And she, you know, it was like Bill when he was out of school. He managed to go ahead and
I did very well. I wouldn't have gotten into Stanford.
Was this during the school year mostly, or was this
Oh, yeah,
also during the
Yes.
summer?
No,
Yeah.
it was
But you see, that wasn't her
During
only.
the school year.
Her only.
You recovered by the summer? So yeah.
Well, I got back to school the next fall.
Okay.
But then that next fall was what your
No, it was a year after
junior
that.
year or your senior year.
My senior year. I went back my senior year. And graduated. I was determined to graduate with my class.
Which she did, and then
And
she
then I
went
went
to
to Stanford.
Stanford, and then she got put back to bed.
Well, the window seat at Robley fell across my back and broke some ribs, and I didn't pay any attention to
How
it.
did that happen?
I washed my hair and walked around with a wet head and got terrible
Pleurisy.
pleurisy, which went back into tuberculosis again. This
And
time
so-
it was a lot worse.
And then this time she was in.
That time I was in
for
bed.
years,
Yeah, I was longer than that.
at least.
18 months without putting a foot over the edge of the bed.
I can't.
That's
Learned
the
to
only-
walk again.
That's the only way to treat TB in this thing.
That was the only
Bed rest.
total bed rest.
But for a lot of people, it was in a sanatorium someplace. I mean,
That's
you moved.
right.
You
Yeah,
were
but
moved
none
out.
Let me be sent away. And there also was a weird theory that you had to be in a high altitude and lie out naked on a bed in the sun.
Yeah, that was,
Which was totally erroneous.
All wrong. And I was not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Who was your doctor at this time? Who was treating
Esther
you?
Clark, Dr. Lee, and they brought in a lung specialist from San Francisco.
And they all pretty much agreed on the treatment. It was just bed rest. That was what
yeah,
they.
that's all it
That's all
did
it
for
was.
TB.
And you had to wait until you were
Unless
better. And
you
it was
got to a place where you
it
had to
was-
have a lung removed, and then it was
And that
surgery.
did happen too, frequently.
But we're talking 18 months,
Right there at that time.
and you were
Life.
It
in
was
your.
a tough time of my life because I could hear the music from the Jolly Ups and things as I was lying here in bed. That was really tough.
Yeah, I would imagine that would not have been a happy time for you
It was
Well, as it turned out, there were a lot of very happy times.
during that 18 months. But you were confined to your room, really.
Yes,
weren't
I
you?
was confined
She
to my
was
room,
not-
but
You
not.
couldn't go to Edenville. You
No.
couldn't go to the cabin. You
No.
couldn't.
Couldn't go
No,
anywhere.
and Mother just stayed absolutely home.
So she didn't travel anywhere either.
She used to invite boys to come over and serve them dinner on a card table in my bedroom while I ate my dinner on a tray.
She had visitors. This
I
was
had
the
lots
thing.
of visitors,
Mhm.
lots of them.
Well, that would be your life in your room, right?
Extreme.
Boy,
Yeah,
I
that's
still
tough.
have a guest book with all the names of the people
And
who
she
came.
she had pledged Kappa, and then of course she had to drop out of school, and the Kappa's got special dispensation to initiate her.
Give me the Bob DeRose thing then. This
And
is
all the Kappas were there constantly, and some of her dearest friends, like Ivy Dane, came every single day.
Ivy wasn't a Kappa.
No, but I just said your dearest
She was my
friends.
roommate.
That's
Mhm.
right. But people
you
like
basically had
Poppy
people
and
moving-
Sue and,
moving
you know,
through the
it wasn't
room.
all Kappas.
Yeah. But you stayed away from her mom, right? You didn't want to get TB from your sister,
Nobody-
right?
Well,
Ever thought
they
so.
just moved me out of the room. That was all.
That was the extent. You're out of here now.
This is an article about Dink Templeton, which Bob DeRose wrote for the Observer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been coming and asking me questions. He says I'm his best source for all kinds of things. And he had this reputation of being really tough and nasty.
Bob did.
No,
DeRose?
Dink did.
Oh, Dink. Well, you didn't say it, or maybe.
Ben Kendrick, 35, testifies for his softness. I spent more than a year in bed with tuberculosis when I was a sophomore, she said recently, and Dink sent a steady stream of athletes to visit me. That was a great prestige and morale builder to have a bunch of world champions at my bedside. And that's true.
And they were. They were.
They were,
Gee, what a group.
But it wasn't just Dink. It had to be your father to some extent too, right? And your mother. I mean, these were
Oh,
people. These were
absolutely.
all
And-
people.
And
They,
your mother and Bill, the support, the moral support was unbelievable.
yeah, and which was, I imagine, for your mental well-being, was absolutely mandatory that it be that way.
Oh,
You would have had big trouble being completely isolated. When was the first time you traveled on your own? Do you remember? When you, yeah, extensively on your own, without parents.
When
How
I
old were
graduated
you?
from college.
oh, I did before that.
And what was your first experience then? Where did you go? And what
Well,
was
I went back to Michigan
for what purpose?
to spend Christmas with Ivy. And I used to go
Was this in terms of TV? When would this have been? Right
After
before you?
she- after
in between.
In between. So it would have been like your first year of Stanford, something like that.
Well, after I got well, yes. No, wait a minute, that's not right.
You didn't do this until after you got well, Betty.
Good.
It wasn't
I know.
in between, because that's when you met Marin again. So that would have been.
Yeah, I did.
No, but did you go to see Ibby once before? I don't remember.
Oh, I've been to see Ivy several times before that. That girl from California is here again. The windows are open and the snow is blowing in. What the neighbors used to say.
Oh, really?
No,
How did you have a lifelong?
I went back to be in her wedding that time.
Oh, sure, I remember.
But I've been back there before that.
Do you have a
I used to go to
lifelong
Michigan.
contact with her?
I used to go to Missouri to see Aunt Gertrude too.
Uh huh.
On your own?
Mm-hmm.
Only once. There aren't enough years.
But you had a lifelong contact with Ibby, I take it.
Still do. She was at my house last month.
Okay, so you still do. That's still ongoing. What about you? You said
I never
yours the
went
first one of your
anyplace.
European trip?
On my own until I graduated from college. And then I took off, and I mean all alone, because Edwin and Murph went before I did, because, they wanted the whole summer, and I stayed to be maid of honor in Peggy Ritter's wedding. And then Mother and I went as far as Columbia Mo together to see
The Trowbridge
Hills.
Oh, the hills, yeah.
And then from St. Louis, I went to New York all alone, and then across the Atlantic alone, and then all the way to Frankfurt alone.
Mother was a basket case.
And I've never
And
been
what?
so...
Why was she a basket case?
Oh, turning her loose like that. She came.
I was 21.
I know it.
But in those days and the way we had lived, you didn't do that.
I flew to New York before that alone and went to the Army Stanford game back
Oh,
then.
yes, I remember.
You flew to New York in
It was
what
terribly
year?
exciting.
It would have
about
been. That would have been early flights, wouldn't
Yeah, we
it?
made about 6 stops on the way, I think.
I believe that.
Dad was so into that. He thought that's the way to travel. You didn't put so
Flying?
much time. Yes, you didn't put so
Yeah.
much time.
Mother didn't like it.
Oh, no.
Well,
She
my mother
did.
doesn't like it either.
She didn't fly until, planes were pretty
I was
When was the first time your mother flew? Do you
Went to New
remember?
York. When she,
But what 40s?
No, it was before that.
Oh,
30s?
30s?
30s.
Really? So that was
I
also
doubt
fairly
that-
early.
I was married in the 30s.
Well, of course, but I don't think Mother flew in the 30s. That's
Oh,
what
no,
I'm
I know
talking
when
about.
Mother flew the first time. It was, don't you remember when Val and I talked her into going back to the World Series?
And
That's
what
right.
would the date have been? The Yankees, I take it, were playing.
Well, I had a couple of kids by that time.
Oh.
And I don't remember whether she'd been sick or Dad had been sick. Anyway, she hadn't made her usual plans to go on the train. And we were all up there one Sunday afternoon. And I guess Marin said to her, when are you leaving for the World Series? And she said, I can't, I don't have enough time. And all of a sudden, everybody in the family got into the act. And he said, well, why don't you fly? I can't fly. She said, well, of course you can fly. She said, well, I don't have any tickets. So Marin got on the phone and called and got her a plane reservation on the condition that I'd go with her, to hold her hand. And
But
Bill,
she wasn't keen on
no, she
this.
wasn't at all.
I can believe
And
that.
then Bill called Casey Stengel and said that Mother didn't have her usual tickets because she hadn't thought she'd be able to come. And Casey said, well, of course she's coming. She'll sit in the box with Mrs. Stengel. And so we didn't give her a chance to think about it twice. So it was practically the next day that Mother and I got on the plane. And it was an overnight flight. And I was exhausted by the time I got on the plane. And do you think that she would keep quiet? She would not. She kept waking me up. Look down there, darling. Look, isn't that the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Why, what do you think that is? Look at the lights. place. That must be Chicago or something. So when we got to New York in the morning, we had to go to a game that day. I was a wreck. And she said, now we're not going to be silly and take a cab or anything like that. We're going to go on the subway. That's the most efficient way to get there. Sure enough.
My grandmother said the subway?
Absolutely. We
My
went on
mother
the
was
subway.
amazing when she went to New York. The subway was not what it is now. It
Well, I
wasn't
can
a
believe
dangerous
that.
place.
It wasn't any glamorous spot.
No, but you weren't going to get mugged if
No.
you went on it.
And that's the way we went. And we went to the games, and all the ones that were in New York.
Now, would you say this is late 40s, early 50s?
Not
We're talking.
Also in the 40s.
We're talking the
Late
late
40s,
late
right?
40s.
No, it was before Kate was born.
Okay, what about DiMaggio? Was he playing? We're talking about then.
Wait a minute, I'll tell you the names of some of the ones who were playing. No, I don't think he was playing.
So it would have been
I think it
after,
was before dementia.
before DiMaggio.
Well, I'd have to look up the statistics on that one. I don't remember exactly.
That's but sometime during the 40s probably.
Well, that was her first flight, but it was far from being.
But it's
her last.
post World War
yes.
II.
It what?
It was
Post World War
Oh,
II.
It was barely post World War II.
Well, you couldn't fly commercially until after World War II.
No, well you could. Marin did.
Well, you could, but
But you had to
people
be
just
pretty much
there
on
were no
government business.
commercial airlines that would
In
just
fact,
take
when I was looking
anybody.
for that stuff for Bob last night, we found the telegram that Marin sent when he was born. You remember that telegram?
No.
It was a masterpiece. He sent it to Mr. Marin Kendrick, care of Mrs. Marin Kendrick at the hospital. And it was dated December 7th, 1943. Bob was born on the 6th, 1943. And it said, your production, first week in December, approved. If this something lives up to the example or lives up to the something set by your first
Whatever.
I wish I could remember exactly.
But you
today.
get the point. I mean, he
My
couldn't send
approval-
her a regular telegram.
My approval is assured. We'll be in California the week of such and such. We'll check on something or other, and signed Alvin E. Roth at the end. The only way it got through on the telegraph was because it sounded so terribly official.
That's amazing.
It was a masterpiece. I'll show it to you. I wish I'd remembered to bring it over today.
Well, at some point we'll have to do some documentation and some pictures and some other, family memorabilia that you have that we can actually just talk about specifically that kind of thing. We kind of jumped there. I mean, in terms of time, the 30s and the 40s, and when you were growing up and going to college and getting married, all of those things were happening. What about your parents? What were their involvements in terms of their activities? Your father was obviously involved with Stanford in a myriad
Yes, he was.
positions, but what about your mother? What was she?
Well, she was too.
Okay, what were some of those
Oh,
things?
cap and gown. She was deeply involved in cap and gown all the time.
Okay.
The Gamma Phi Beta house. And
She was the alumni whatever for
Advisor.
that, and she had a lot to do. She was the head of the clubhouse at Stanford, which was a
Women's
pain in the
clubhouse.
neck. She was into
the Women's Faculty Club.
the YWCA. She obviously the convalescent hospital or home.
Convalescent home in those days.
Yes.
You're talking almost all the activity on the Stanford campus.
That's right.
Is that right?
No, because for instance, at the time of the World's Fair in San Francisco, she was on the committee for that.
In what capacity?
It was the hospitality committee.
And they were responsible for putting all of that planting along the Bay Shore. Every time I see some of the remnants of that, I think of Mother going through all this stuff about what they were going to plant there
What planting?
to beautify
To
it.
beautify the highway.
Yeah, but specifically, what kind of plants?
Well,
Good
they,
grief, Jim, you don't think we did.
No, I'm just curious.
I'll have to look and
What
see.
stretch of the freeway are we talking
well,
about?
from Burlingame to San Francisco, possibly.
Okay.
Which didn't go in the same direction, in the same line
Look,
as
yeah.
No.
Yeah, they changed it to go out in the bay.
But she was a member of the Women's City Club.
And she was very active up there.
She was in all kinds of things.
Okay.
She went to the symphony in San Francisco.
Okay. All
Years and
all
years.
volunteer stuff. Never paid a penny
of
for any of the
course
stuff she did, right?
No.
Yes. Oh, no.
Was she
No,
ever in a
considered.
paid position?
Never. Oh no.
So it was all volunteer stuff.
Everything.
But things kept her busy all the time in
Yes,
terms of
very.
the house and the volunteer activities that
Oh,
she
yes. She was a very busy
Now,
lady.
did. Your father, very athletic in college. Did he follow that up with? It was basically the building and the hunting and that kind of thing, or did he stay
he played
athletic
golf,
after
too.
that?
Golf.
Well,
He
golf.
was an avid
certainly.
golfer.
Somebody asked me. We were talking about the Stanford Golf Course and development of the Stanford Golf Course. Do you remember the date that the course was actually built?
You know, when I was in high school, I used to walk over the hills with him, and I'd say, this is where the first green is going to be.
How much influence did he actually have in laying out that?
Tremendous.
There were only 2 holes that were changed from the way he had dreamed it.
Really? Who was the architect?
Robert Trent Jones.
But he must have been in close association with your father. This was
Well-
Robert Trenton Jones Sr.
Senior, yeah.
Right.
No, Dad walked him around and said this was sort of the way he dreamed it up. And Jones said, well, that's pretty hard to beat that.
Okay, so the golf course, in effect, was your father's idea of where to
Creation,
situate,
absolutely.
where the holes would
Nobody
be,
thought of having
Exactly.
a golf course at Stanford till Dad did.
and that was because of his love of golf.
Of
That's right.
course.
Okay, and if I remember correctly, your grandfather had a love of
We
golf
certainly did.
also, and he was playing in San Jose when he was still in his 80s.
Oh,
He
yes.
shot a hole in one on his 80th birthday and made Ripley's Believe It or Not, which was very embarrassing. I can remember him reading the paper the day after that, as he used to count the ads every day. And
Count the ads.
Count the issues of the ads.
I don't believe this.
The first thing he did, the publisher, this is how the publisher of papers lives. He would open his paper and count the columns of ads to see how well they'd done financially. And then he read the paper.
And while he was in the process of doing that, he came to the Ripley's Believe It or Not, and he almost died of embarrassment over having made it.
He didn't realize this was going to run?
No.
Oh, that seems
No,
like
it
a...
ran nationwide.
But the thrill of making that hole in one, that was
Oh, that
the
was great.
highlight of his life.
And this was actually on his
On his
80th
80th
birthday
birthday.
that he did this.
Yeah.
What was the course in San Jose? Municipal course?
No,
No,
San
San
Jose
Jose
Country
Golf Course.
Club.
Okay, the country club.
Yeah.
Okay. Your father also played golf.
Oh, they used to play together a lot.
Really?
Sure.
Sure.
In San Jose?
Probably
Well,
yes,
yes.
only because Dad loved going to every golf course he could ever find.
That
I mean, he
include
was-
Monterey?
Oh,
Yes,
sure.
sure.
He played
I don't
all
remember
of
him going to
those in
Monterey.
Castlemont. Your father used to drive him to some of these places.
My father?
Your father.
My father played golf?
Yes.
Sure, and Bill used to play
So
with
did your mother, Jim.
No,
So
I'm
did
afraid
your
not.
Aunt
Not in my memory.
Well,
We're
no,
talking
not
about
your
before.
memory, but
We're
your
talking
mother
about
was a good
pre-birth,
golfer.
as far as I'm concerned.
Your mother was a good golfer. Eb and I used to play together, but we had a very strange way of playing. We used to get so mad at the caddies who would be sitting there and making remarks to us on the first tee. But we got so we would throw the ball off the first tee. Hit it with a golf club.
I think there's something illegal about that. I'm not sure that's the way the Scots
We were just
envisioned that
playing along.
game.
We used to play down at Los Alamos.
I took golf as a sport at Stanford.
The courses your father, I can remember playing Crystal Springs, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then,
Play there in a Burlingame.
what about the Olympic Club?
No,
I don't
he
think
didn't
he
belong to
ever-
the.
But he didn't belong, but he played San Francisco Golf Club a lot
Well, he
of
did belong to
times.
San Francisco Golf Club.
Sure, but he didn't belong
But
to
never
the
played
Olympic
Olympic.
Club.
Yeah.
That surprises me. I wonder why he did not.
Because he belonged to San Francisco. He didn't need
Well, but
two
he-
golf
he
clubs
belonged-
in one city.
I suppose that's true, but the Olympic course is a really nice course. I can't believe
Well,
he
there's
never
no
played.
wrong with the
So
San
San
Francisco
No,
Golf
no,
Course.
but I can't believe he never played the Olympic
Well, he
course.
probably did. As
Oh,
a guest
sure.
of
Oh,
the team.
sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he did too.
But
it
he
wasn't
also,
just
what's the
regular
municipal course? He also played that. He played every golf course he could play.
Yeah, and loved it.
Oh,
Yes.
loved it. The dinner conversation sometimes in our house used to be every single shot he had hit the entire 18 holes.
So is he any good?
yes.
Oh, yes, he was good.
Yes.
What's good? What kind of a handicap? What are we talking here?
Well, he would shoot in the low 80s and high 70s.
So that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good golf.
I mean, it was a darn good golfer.
And then he would spend his evenings out practicing golf.
I can remember Carolyn's having the putting holes out there on the lawn. He still had
Well,
that
he
then.
had putting holes on the rugs at Stanford, and he rigged up that dumb thing in the garage where he hit his drives into this canvas in the back of the garage. You could hear the ball going whack, bam, biff out there. And he had all kinds of nets and everything to catch them when they bounced back from the canvas so they all wouldn't go into the
Okay, did your
garden.
mother ever play a
Oh.
round of golf?
No, never even walked around.
Never even walked around. When this is being discussed at the dinner table, would she sit there quietly?
No, she
No,
would
she
say,
was
"Oh,
interested.
darling, isn't that wonderful? What a marvelous shot!"
After
She
all,
was
she-
just right in it,
She'd been a fan of his sports-wise since they were in college.
and she
She
loved
was
to
a
hear
great
about the
supporter.
golf. This was nothing that anybody didn't like hearing about. It was just a
We have
very
gotten really all
large
caught up in it.
conversation piece at our dinner table.
And at the time this was at your dinner table, had the course at Stanford been constructed?
Well, it probably was going
Yes.
on before, during, and after.
Would you say this was the 30s? Was it being built during the 30s?
Well, it was, oh yeah.
I think so, yes.
Oh, it was well built by the time I went to college in '34.
Okay, so we're talking maybe as soon as your father got there.
No,
No,
no.
no, oh no.
Then it had to have been 32, 33, though,
Possibly,
wasn't it?
possibly, yeah.
I think it was maybe it might have
31.
been started in the late 20s,
30,
in the very
maybe,
tail end of the 20s, and finished in the 30s.
something like that.
So-
But it was well established when I was in
So
college.
10 years after your father got there, this is
Maybe.
something along
At
those
least
lines.
10. I
Well,
mean,
not
it
much
wouldn't have
more than
been.
that, Mitch.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Of the other construction on the Stanford campus that he was primarily responsible with, I've always heard the Frost Amphitheater is that there.
Totally
That
his
was one of
idea.
his favorites.
Okay, the stadium was built before he,
No.
Just
Stadium
when
was
he-
the first thing that was done
Just
after
when
we
he
got
first went to Stanford.
but there was already the idea that there would be a stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yes, but nobody had worked out how it was going to be done.
Okay, so one of his basic responsibilities was the
This was the
idea of
first-
putting together
That
the
was the
stadium.
first project of construction after we went to Stanford.
So that would have been about 1920
You
or
see, he had an interesting position because he had so many facets. I mean, he's in charge of the construction out there while he's also in the financial office and while he's supervising all the lands of Stanford. And, you know,
All the investments.
it was
all the investments. But I take it the
extremely-
building was one of the most important things
was
for
one of the
him.
things he loved the most.
Yeah, I mean he
That's
really
one thing
enjoyed
that
doing that.
probably
didn't he?
appealed to him enough to make him go back to Stanford.
But he was really changing the face of the university
Oh,
while
yeah.
he was there.
He made more difference on the campus than any one person since it's been built.
Well, you can't say that now.
Yes, I can.
No,
I just heard her say it. I think she
Well,
can say
think
it.
how,
Mitch, it was
how
the first- it was
vastly
the-
Stanford has
Yes,
grown.
I know, but that was the first change. Those were the first changes that were made when after Dad came there. And
Yeah,
What's-
because up to then there had
And did he have in his mind an idea of what he wanted Stanford to become? Or was
it
this
was
just
being
something that
developed
was
as the needs grew.
right? So you don't think he had an overall plan, but certainly in terms of the environment itself and the way they wanted to fit the campus into
Very
the
strong feelings
community.
about that.
Yeah, I think there was more or less a continuity of architecture and scale, possibly those kinds of things. Now the stadium itself would have been built the early 20s
very
then.
early
Yes.
20s.
What about the
first
plan?
game was played in there in 1921.
Okay, what about the plans for the stadium? Was this something he came up with? Worked with an
no,
architect?
one of the professors in the engineering department.
So the idea of hollowing it out, basically what they did was create a hole and get
That's
the
right.
dirt out to the
Have you ever seen the
outside.
pictures of the mule teams?
I've seen some of the early pictures, right? And he was very involved with the actual construction.
Absolutely.
Well, he was like supervising the job,
Right.
which is what he did with all the things that were built while he was there.
Okay, now let's talk about that. You got the stadium, you got Frost Amphitheater.
Yeah, but that's
Oh,
long